And then so it's like the merging of so-called reality, what we used to call reality. Because that's the main point of Jean Baudrillard, is that there is no reality anymore. There's only virtuality and fictions and merging. Let's see. Okay, people call, we know that in literature and film we have a genre called utopian and a genre called dystopian. So utopian means when the writer or the film imagines a better society, a perfect society. Dystopia is the opposite of like a nightmare society like 1984. I think The Prisoner contains both utopian and dystopian principles. On one level, the village appears to be an idyllic democratic society striving to maintain utopian ideals. On a second level, it is clearly a dystopian totalitarian society. On a third level, it is beyond both of these more obvious readings as a society where hidden and creative possibilities of freedom exist for the individual. I actually think The Prisoner also does present a positive idea of freedom for the individual. And a lot of time, even though he's often trying to escape, I think that number 6 also tries to find freedom within his situation. Okay, why don't we show the first clip from Arrival? Outside of his residence, it says 6 private, and that's interesting because there is no privacy anymore, right? And we see that especially nowadays in this age of new media, new technologies, that the concepts of public and private, I think, don't make sense anymore. Everything is invasive. When I'm online, there are now all these invasive programs coming into my web browser, advertising. When I use Skype, like I see all the time when other people come online and offline, so other people are present in my living room or my work room while I'm working on my computer. And it's interesting that in most political science departments at universities, they still use these concepts, public and private, which come from liberal political theory. And I think The Prisoner goes beyond liberal political theory to lots of new insights. The episodic story of The Prisoner unfolds in the opening 2.5-minute credit sequence with stirring theme music. This sequence frames the story for viewers by including events the protagonist experiences prior to waking in the village. This narrative is shown more at length in the initial episode of The Prisoner Arrival. After McGowan's character resigns from his position as a high-ranking government agent, he drives his Lotus 7 with determination back through the city of London to his townhouse. Unaware that 2 sinister men driving a hearse follow him home, the character without a name packs his suitcase with contents that include travel brochures of faraway countries where he would like to vacation. Then he falls faint onto his bed while inhaling a gaseous agent released through the keyhole in his front door. In the following scene, he wakes up in an apartment in the village, an exact duplicate of part of his London dwelling. He's driving the car through London, a car that he built and customized himself. It's a symbol of freedom, and it's an ironic commentary on, the driving what is a car in Western society? A car is part of the consumer culture. And by having your own private car, individual car, you're able to drive at high speeds. On the highway, you're independent from public transportation. It became, especially in the 1960s, a symbol of freedom. But I think here it's presented very ironically, because we know that very soon Patrick McGowan's character will have no freedom at all. The visual preamble elicits questions including who is this man, why did he resign, where is the village, how did he get from London to the village, who is the supreme authority of the village. The village is a nameless place systematically referred to as here or this place. Sometimes it is called an international community. The villagers themselves are also nameless and referred to solely by their assigned number. The prisoner's number 6. The village comes complete with a video surveillance system, telephone service, radio station, television station, and daily newspaper, the Tally-Ho. So all of it is a commentary on media in contemporary society, both in the 60s and now in 2014. It's a hybrid between the 60s and now. So even the Tally-Ho is a kind of satirical commentary on daily newspapers as they are. And I think, the reenactment that we did this morning of the election is, I think, an incredibly brilliant political commentary about, like, presidential elections in the US, for example, is that, this idea that is it a democracy or is it a television democracy, a simulation of a democracy? We have these two major parties in America, Democrats and Republicans. Does it really matter who wins? They're both servants of the military-industrial complex, as Eisenhower called it. On the surface, the village appears to be a democratic society offering forms of entertainment, marching bands, costume balls. There's something of the carnivalesque, I think, in the village, which is a major theme in Mikhail Bakhtin and in Baudrillard, writing about the carnivalesque as a form of literature. The cafe, the general store, hospitality service, various forms of media, government organizations, citizens advice bureau, town hall, labor exchange, hospital, a council that claims to be democratically elected. Located at the hub is the Green Dome, housing number 2, the leader of the village bureaucracy. As dictator, number 2 answers only to number 1. Just as village authorities seek information, just as the prisoner stops at nothing to hold on to his own personal information, the key commodity in our modern world is frequently said to be information. The village is the ultimate in indoctrination and subjection of the individual, just like Marshall McLuhan's Global Village. The establishment has entirely taken over. Individual freedom is dead. People no longer want to think for themselves, or they are not capable of doing so. The prisoner is the one man who is resisting, or is he resisting? That is one of the main questions to be posed. Freedom of the individual, paradoxically, is the central concept of classical liberal theory. The individual, that's the thing, is if the prisoner were only presenting an idea about freedom from liberal theory, then it would not be so relevant, because the liberal idea of freedom is the individual struggling against the state, as in 1984. It wouldn't be so contemporary. But freedom is actually a much more subtle battle today between these dominant media which surround us everywhere, like, and even fandom, people who are fans of TV shows of all kinds, that's a very creative act, because we're taking texts that are produced by Hollywood or the BBC, and then we're making our own creative use of them, which I think is very important, and that is an expression of freedom. Another iconographical artifact that reminds village prisoners, and number 6, about this illusory freedom is the statue of Atlas. From number 6 point of view, in Arrival, we see the Greek god crouched down, carrying the planet Earth on his shoulders. One meaning connoted by the statue is that man, no matter how hard he fights, how much strength he possesses, is always bowed down by the weight of the world. Another meaning could be that since Atlas was made to carry the world on his back as a punishment for battling against Zeus, number 6 too will be punished if he fights against authority by not complying with the rules of the village. The boundaries of space and time collapse in Marshall McLuhan's Global Village. That was McLuhan's main point, is that when we have a worldwide connected media society, then there takes place a very deep crisis of space and time. I'm, sitting in my room in Frankfurt and having a virtual conversation with someone in New York on the other side of the planet. Where is the here and the there? What is the distance? What is the difference between here and there? It's no longer clear. Time as well, obviously, is in crisis. McLuhan's village. We have McLuhan's Global Village and McLuhan's village in The Prisoner. We see in the architecture of Portmeirion different historical periods alluded to in the content of different episodes. The vast number of historical periods by the several architectural styles in the village. Sir Williams Ellis brought together a mishmash of architectural pieces from around the world, striving to create an atmosphere, eliciting a feeling of being everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So I think that William Ellis, in the 1920s, he already had this, what I call hyper-modernist view of the crisis in space and time. What is information? The database in The Prisoner, controlled by number 2 and presumably number 1, consists of all the most detailed and intimate pieces of information on each and every member of the village. Prisoner is a narrative metaphor for understanding many aspects of the contemporary sociological and technological situation of the hyper-modern society. Number 6 has become a sort of human database. The reason for his resignation is that his secrets are so overwhelming that he wants to get away. Marshall McLuhan said, there's no escape from the global village. It's also possible to interpret The Prisoner through Freud and psychoanalysis, I think, would be another way of looking at it, and almost the opposite from this sociological view. Because you could easily say, sometimes I think watching it, that number 6, he's not only a hero who we identify with and feel empathy with. I can also view him as an anti-hero, that he's actually making some serious mistakes, and that would be a metaphor for Freudian psychoanalysis, because one of the basic ideas of psychoanalysis is that you cannot run away from your own life. you have to confront, you have to face the basic issues in your own life. You have to stick with it. You have to go on with the analysis until you understand enough to change yourself and grow. And so in a sense, all the prisoner's attempts to escape are a mistake if we would take it, the village not as a sociological metaphor, but as a metaphor for his psyche, for his own mind, that he's not, doesn't have the staying power to deal with it. I think it's also interesting that I've always thought he is his own worst enemy in a way. Like his fatal flaw is that he wants to, not only does he want to escape, but he wants to get revenge on the powers behind the village. He wants to destroy the village. He wants to find out the truth. He has certain obsessions like that. So if what he really wanted is to go away on these vacations, as we see in the travel brochures that he's packing into a suitcase, if that was really his main goal, well, he has the chance to do that in the chimes of, well, no, in the chimes of Big Ben, he actually never leaves the village, but he believes that he's in London. But in the Many Happy Returns, he could have just disappeared. I think he has no awareness of the importance of disappearing, and he kind of walks into the trap himself because he wants to destroy the village, and then he ends up being ejected from the helicopter and in the parachute and landing back in the village. Yeah, you have a number and not a name. McLuhan was commenting on the reality that with every passing day we are more and more identified by, and reduced to being a mere number in every aspect of our lives. Not only what I said before in the obvious way about I'm known by my student ID number and my bank account numbers, so there's like no number, but even more profoundly in this line, it's a beautiful line, and it's the first line of the show when he picks up the phone and the operator wants his number, doesn't know that he's number 6, and she says, no number, no call. And just that is, I think, a beautiful summary of Marshall McLuhan, because what does call mean? Call means, in this case, telephone, but it means participation in the global media communication networks. If you don't agree to the rules, which you are just a number, then you cannot participate in the information and communication society. And essentially, McLuhan said, because McLuhan's object of inquiry and reflection, Marshall McLuhan, was the new global communication media society. And he said, it's transforming us into disembodied selves. Right? It's a very important word, disembodied. In other words, when you're on the internet, when you're talking on the telephone, it's not a face-to-face interaction, you're being disembodied. And you become discarnate information just by using technological media. The telephone is a technological device which permits communication across borders and time zones. McLuhan says, in so doing, the classical dimensions of space and time collapse. The actual distance from location points between telephone receivers is irrelevant. Villagers, reduced to mere numbers, are disembodied and discarnate in the sense that they are not identified by face or physical being, but by the number on their lapel. So the technology of the telephone comes into play in the very first few minutes of arrival. Number 6, the first thing that number 2 says to number 6 is, you have become a valuable piece of property, right? So that's his dehumanization. Then we have Rover as a security system. That's like along with surveillance. We have this Sicherheitsobsession. The village employs scientific methods, technological gadgetry, and psychological procedures in a perverse manner. Another main theme in The Prisoner is psychological torture. And that's also very relevant today if we consider, I mean, when you're thinking about The Prisoner, you also got to mention real prisons. Prisons like the ones that George W. Bush, our next to most recent president, created, like Abu Ghraib in Iraq, and Guantanamo in Cuba, or on the American base next to Cuba. And so we see the kinds of psychological torture that's used by the authorities of the village, and The Prisoner connects very well with psychotorture used on prisoners in Guantanamo. And not only by Americans, right? I mean, also by a regime like the Iranians, who I mentioned, or the Chinese, so I'm not just blaming it all on America. Rover is the village watchdog who enforces the law by physical means. Rover and the small mini rovers are big white meteorological balloons acting as security devices to prevent villagers from escaping. These guard dogs are controlled by yellow, orange, and red alerts operated via push button by number 2 or by control room attendants. Should any citizen attempt to escape or cross village boundaries, whether by land or sea or sky, Rover will stop them in their tracks. Will engulf